I are from Sydney Water. We're here to talk to you about uncomfortable truths and blind spots that kill innovation. So the purpose of our talk is to introduce this idea of third space innovation and talk about how third space innovation can drive innovation in all spaces. But just to make it a bit personal, the reason why I'm here today, I'm an engineer. I work in a network operations team. The reason I've chosen to be a part of all of this kind of stuff is that I noticed the biggest impact that I could have to support my team and my team's effectiveness is actually with people, collaboration and innovation. We could all be better technically, anyone could be better at anything, but I think the biggest opportunities is actually in the way that we do things and how we work together. So that's why I've chosen to get amongst collaboration and innovation from an engineering and technical sort of a role. Michael?
And I'm Michael Malikides. Thanks for that fantastic introduction, Belinda. I'm here because I've been part of a culture change program that's been running in Sydney Water for a little bit over 2 years. Not to say that's the only things that we've been working on in a culture space in Sydney Water, but recently we've been concentrating on our mindsets, our behaviours and our values. And what we will show you today are some of the things that we're seeing happening in Sydney Water, and they're particularly exciting. So I'm here to share that excitement with you.
So we're just going to introduce the three spaces of the organisation and also acknowledge and thank Locomotive Consulting, who have been working with us using a Blue Bus program that we've used to focus on behaviours and mindsets and values. So this is one of their concepts. So tools, skills and tactics. Can I just ask you all for a show of hands, whose organisation is investing in innovation in tools, skills and tactics? Cool, thanks.
Right up, hands right up.
What about systems, processes and strategies? Yep, quick nod there. What about behaviours, mindsets and values? Cool. So I guess what I just want to ask you there is, and we are at an innovation conference, so people might be pretty tuned into this kind of stuff, but how long did it take you to recognise, oh yes, we're definitely innovating in tools, skills and tactics, the first space? I think people naturally know that. Same with systems, processes and strategies. We know we're innovating there, but when we have to think about innovation in that behaviours, mindsets, values, that culture space, we just might have to think about it a little bit more because it might be a little bit more fluffy for some people. So we talk about the first and the second space being above the line, the hardware, tangibles, and the third space being the software, below the line stuff. It's harder to see, it's the bottom of the iceberg. So that's what we're here to talk a little bit about today.
So at Sydney Water, we're doing safety differently. We're doing water differently. We're doing customers differently. And we're doing Sydney Water differently. So what we're essentially saying is, what we're doing differently is we're innovating in the third space. The two circles, we have leadership and we have innovation. What connects our leaders to innovation is our culture. In order to have great innovation, we need a great culture, and the culture is driven by our leaders. Just a note, when we talk about our leaders, we're not talking about a line manager, we're not talking about somebody with a group of people reporting to them, we're talking about everybody in our organisation. Every single person is a leader and is considered a leader. So we're doing culture to build the capability of our leaders to innovate and perform. Some of the insights that we've had, this little cartoon is a metaphor for our people. The compass is a metaphor for uncomfortable truths. What we mean by uncomfortable truths is that we really need a compass to help us identify where we are and where we want to go, the direction we're heading in. The binoculars are a metaphor for blind spots. And blind spots are the barriers that get in the way. The binoculars are going to help us focus and see those barriers. Those tin cans joined by that cord, they're how we communicate, and They're the decision making that helps us support our decisions and our communication. Are our people set up to succeed?
So we've had our little analogy that if we want to get where we're going, where we want to go, then we need to know where we are. We need to be able to see what's in the way, and we need to have an effective way of communicating and making decisions so that our people are set up to succeed. So a blind spot, we all have blind spots. We're naturally evolved to have them. We have so many threats and pieces of information and decisions coming at us all of the time. If we didn't have blind spots and unconscious decision making, we wouldn't be able to survive. We just need to naturally know so that we don't fall over, so that we remember to breathe, all of these sorts of things. There's a lot of unconscious things happening. The thing is, though, that not all of these blind spots have evolved to actually help us. So in a practical sense, in a work sense, what does a blind spot actually look like? Here's a list here, but I'll talk about a little example. Managers speaking first in a meeting. So after going through this Blue Bus program, we've had a manager who actually had this reflection that he realised, I always speak first in a meeting. I never really noticed before, but that's something I do. And I wonder what impact that's actually having on my people. Is that constraining their thoughts? Like, I'm always that one to talk first, and that's probably anchoring everyone's ideas to mine. So that's what it can look like. It can be something that small. What does it feel like? Well, blissful ignorance. Do you remember every second of every day that you're breathing? No, you don't. It's just ignorance. It doesn't feel like anything. But what it can feel like when you recognise it is like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that actually I was having that much of an impact. I never realised. That's what a blind spot can feel like once you find them. It's a mental barrier that we cannot see, but it influences our mindsets and behaviours. That's what a blind spot is. So if we know we all have them, how can we make them visible? Well, first, we need to recognise that we have them. We need to know that they're there. And we need to reflect on our mindsets and behaviours. We just need to take that time to look back at what was my contribution to that situation. What impact did I have on that person? And if you take that time to really stop and think and recognise that you did have an impact, only then can you start to think, oh, right, yeah, those little behaviours that I have, that's the impact. If you reflect on your behaviour and notice an impact, it does not make you bad or wrong or anything at all. It's just noticing that the way that you operate has an effect on other people. And if you want to have a positive impact, then you need to make sure that your actions are in alignment with the impact that you want to have. So it doesn't mean that the way you speak is wrong at all. It just means that when that's received by another person, that might not be the impact that you wanted to have. So to uncover our blind spots, we basically need to learn self-awareness and to self-correct.
Okay, uncomfortable truths. An uncomfortable truth is something that we know, but we don't really want to talk about it. We don't want to raise it. It's something that we can see, we can feel, we know, but we don't bring it up. There's some examples of what, pardon me, what it can look like, but I'd like to give you a more, maybe a tangible one. Who has brought up an uncomfortable truth or something difficult, had a difficult conversation with their manager? Who's brought up something that they know they need to raise and talk about with their manager? And maybe we probably don't really feel like it's an easy thing to do. It's awkward. What it does, if you raise it with your manager, raise that uncomfortable truth or that situation with them, is that you're challenging the status quo. You're asking them about something that they probably know or realise themselves, but maybe haven't been themselves comfortable to talk about. But in doing that, you're showing a level of vulnerability and a level of authenticity when you raise those issues with them. And what does that feel like? I'm sure if you've had those conversations or you've thought about having them, you probably can almost anticipate what it would feel like, but it would feel edgy. it'd feel uncomfortable. But probably what it would most feel like if you had the courage to raise the issue, it would feel like a huge burden has been lifted off your shoulders. But what raising uncomfortable truths does is it means that you're challenging the status quo. And the status quo is what we really need to do to uncover insights that we'd like to pursue. If we don't uncover those insights, if we don't raise or challenge the status quo, then we're continuing to plod along and work in the way we've always worked. And it's like we're on an escalator and the escalator stops, but we don't really know what we're supposed to do once it stops. We keep walking. So how can we get or make an uncomfortable truth comfortable? Probably the main thing here is 2 words, role model. So if we're leaders, if we're all leaders, then role modelling means that we're creating we are creating a ripple with people around us. People will watch us and learn from us. And the way we can role model is to ask those questions, raise those uncomfortable truths. It's also to challenge the status quo, to respectfully raise issues. And you can either do that yourself, or if someone does it in your company, you can backmark them, you can support them. You don't have to agree with what they've said, but you can say, look, I've heard what you said and I appreciate the courage you've shown in bringing that issue up. So we need people to feel safe and to speak up. All of those things, backmarking, raising those uncomfortable truths, create an environment that impacts people around us, and through that, they will feel safe, and it's okay for them to also raise those matters. In other words, acknowledge reality.
So just to acknowledge a little bit of reality, we also need to look at our systems for communication and decision making, the things that we do. Are the systems that we have actually supporting or constraining innovation? We need to get to some uncomfortable truths in this space. So training versus learning. Do we focus on training or do we focus on learning? I know some organisations have changed and they've got a learning department, but we invest heavily in training without necessarily always considering, well, hang on a minute, we know that people go into e-learning and they just hit play and then they do something else in the background. Oh, yep, finished now. And they do the quiz at the end, maybe not even engaging with our e-learning at all. So we have to talk about this, this whole concept so that we can actually get to a point where we're getting good learning rather than just good training. Procedures versus how we really do it. Anyone ever gone and said, somebody you're learning something, they're like, oh, that's a procedure. Oh, yeah, don't worry about it. This is how we actually do it. This is how we really do it here. You often see, if you see a nice, shiny, beautiful path that goes along and around a corner, you might see a well-worn, cut groove in the dirt because that's where everyone actually walks because that's where they want to go. That's what suits them. Procedures versus how we really do it. We need to talk about it. Consult versus collaborate. People are very sensitive. They can pick up when people are not being honest or completely transparent. So if we ask for somebody's opinion, if we consult, we've got to think about, well, what are we going to do with their opinion when they give it to us? Are we taking that into account, or have we already made the decision and we're just going through a process of consulting because we have to? Or are we collaborating, actually taking their input on board? Performance review versus personal development. How well do our performance review structures and systems and processes actually support personal development? Or does personal development almost exist outside of that process in a lot of ways? Status quo versus doing new things. How well are our current ways actually supporting us to do what we want to do? So if we think about, somebody said to me, oh, I don't know why anybody just doesn't innovate. Why don't they do things? There's no consequences for anything around here. But are there really no consequences? If you stop to think, what would happen to you if you just went to work every day and you were polite, you did what you were supposed to do, and you talked to the people that were around you, and then you went home? What would be the consequences for that? What about if you went to work, you asked a lot of questions, you saw things that made you uncomfortable, you expressed some emotion, you challenged things, you tried different things. You tried something that didn't really work. You made a mistake, you took a risk. What are the consequences for doing that? And if you just think about that in your own organisations, have a think about, you probably can think of people that fit those descriptions. What are the consequences? What do they experience when they do that? So if we just wrap all of these things up, our uncomfortable truths, our blind spots and our systems, an uncomfortable truth is something that we do know but we don't say. It's too uncomfortable. Blind spot is something that we don't even know if we don't think about it. And our systems have the capacity to either support or constrain us in what we're trying to do. All of them can lead us to have actions that are not aligned with our values and objectives. It is the age of the customer. Most organisations these days, I expect, will have some objective around better customer service. We value our customers. But are our actions aligned to our objective of serving customers if our people don't have easy access to the tools that they need in order to do the job well? If there's a lot of paperwork that needs to get filled out before they can get to the point of doing something, are our actions really aligned to our objectives? And it's not that we are not well-intentioned, we always are. If you look at everyone has good intentions. But if we don't stop to think about what blind spots we might have and what uncomfortable truths there might be, then how can we actually acknowledge that reality of everything and how our systems are supporting us to achieve that objective? The same can go for values. We'll have a value where we value our community, we value our people, we want to keep them safe and well. But if we're not able to talk about these uncomfortable truths, things that happen out there every day, or procedures versus reality, oh, there was a procedure for that. But if people are not following it, we need to be able to say, hey, you know what, we don't follow that procedure. And then talk about why not, because maybe we could write a procedure that actually reflects reality. And then if we're talking about that, we can much better align our actions to both the objectives that we're trying to achieve and our values, what we believe is important on the way.
Okay, so are our people set up to succeed? Do we have a view where we look outside our organisation for innovation? Do we think that innovation comes from a technical group of people who are technical experts? Do we think that our people or our front line are capable of or have insights that could contribute to innovation? So how does it fit? How does what we've just been speaking about, our uncomfortable truths, our blind spots, our communication and decision making, where does that all fit? Well, if we zoom out, it fits right within that culture space there. If we focus and concentrate, well, we are focusing and concentrating our efforts in the culture space, then we'll build great people with great leadership capability, and from that will arise an awesome amount of innovative ideas. Innovation's in the third space. So here's a nice photo with a group of people. There's senior managers there from Sydney Water. There's frontline workers there from Sydney Water. What are we seeing at Sydney Water? Culture is linked to well-being. I don't know is a good thing. Team-driven process improvements. GM connection to the front line. Culture in contract selection. Uncomfortable conversations. Shared problem solving. Team feedback to managers. Lots and lots. We could keep bombarding you with all these different things that we're seeing. Lots of stuff, lots of great stuff. What I'd like to talk to you about is one down there towards the bottom right called Lunatic Ideas Encouraged. Just to give you a sense of what that means, when we're rolling out the Blue Bus program, it's not a bottom-up or a top-down program, it's non-hierarchical. So the idea that everybody would participate was how we designed it and rolled it out. But I guess the first lunatic idea that we had was whether or not the managing director is part of that. So we asked him. We said, Kevin, do you want to participate in the Blue Bus program? And his answer was, look, I've heard great things about it. I'd love to. So I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So there's been and is a lot of conversation that happens between Kevin Young as the Managing Director and the Fair Work Commission and the Australian Services Union. And that's probably the biggest union in Sydney Water. And this bit of an us and them culture exists between the two organisations, the ASU and Sydney Water. And we thought, well, another lunatic idea might be to ask Kevin whether it'd be a good idea that he participates in the Blue Bus program with one of the key organisers in the ASU. And Kevin said, that's a great idea, I'll ask him. So he asked him, and that fellow, Bluey, Robert McLean, said, yep, love to participate. So he went along and participated. When they did the training, we then asked them, well, what do you think? How can we fan this message out even further? And Kevin said, well, I'd like to invite the Secretary of the ASU and I'd like to invite the Assistant Fair Work Commissioner along to do the training. I said, brilliant, another lunatic idea. Then we thought, well, how far do we stop? Do we stop at the top of the organisation? What actually is the top of the organisation? Is it the Managing Director? I said, well, actually it's not, it's the Board of Directors. So another lunatic idea, should we ask the Board of Directors to participate in the Blue Bus training? So they're going to participate in April. But what organisations do you know that have the Board of Directors participating in a culture program with the organisation, with its people? I don't know of any. Kevin's so excited, we're all excited to see them as being actually part of our community. I think it's totally awesome. So that's some examples of some lunatic ideas and lunatic thinking.
Yeah, so just talking about the board, they invited us to come and, just give them a little introduction to the Blue Bus session, the Blue Bus concept. And so Michael was on leave, so I had the good fortune of going to speak to the board of directors, which was fantastic, with George from Locomotive and Alison Stanley, who manages our Culture and Insights program. And one of the most awesome things that we did, we started with a personal connection, and we just asked everybody, can you tell us someone else that's made you proud and why? And one thing that I thought was really fantastic is that our chairman of the board, Bruce Morgan, he said, thank you for asking that question. And yeah, I'm going to share with you a story that no one else in the room has heard. And then he went on to tell a story about his family, which I won't share because it's in privacy within the room. But the awesome thing was that by these board of directors sharing all of their personal stories, they actually had a lot of commonality between them. They're all just people. Most of them shared a story about their family, and most of them had some family member who had kind of experienced some sort of challenge or trauma somehow. And just having that opportunity to connect made them see each other as real people. And it made it way more comfortable for me, who I sometimes call myself a bit of a pleb. I'm just, one of the yellow shirts on the ground. I just was the same as them in that room. We were just people. And it's so powerful being able to see each other just as that. And that was a really awesome thing. And another one, where we've got it in here, something that, giving feedback to our managers, having courageous conversations. If you can really actually tell your managers the truth, it's fantastic. And it's not all bad. One of the really key things about this, especially for anyone in the room who's a people leader and wondering how this goes, it can be positive as well as negative. We saw the most awesome email come through the other day about a team member who'd written a story saying, wow, our manager, I've seen her grow so much in her leadership through embracing this Blue Bus concept and taking on board all of the learnings. She's been collaborating, she's really supported us. And that story went through and was shared, and we'll put it out in e-news. So that was a staff member really singing the praises of their manager and telling her positive feedback, like, you have developed so much as a leader. And I just think that's fantastic. How often do you go up to your manager and say, I think you're doing really well? I think we often tell our managers when they've stuffed up or when we hate a decision that they've made. How often do we tell them, hey, you're awesome, you were doing a great job? And that's one of the really powerful stories. So Leadership drives culture and culture drives innovation. That's why we're doing culture. But this guy here in the picture, what do you reckon he's going to see when he gets to that hill in the distance? He is going to see another hill. It is not a sprint, it is a marathon. If he is only looking at that hill off in the distance, he's going to get to that hill and he's going to be terribly upset because there's just going to be another one. It will feel like he is never going to get there. And here's the thing, you are never going to get there. There's always another challenge, there's always a change, there's always another task, process. There's more blind spots than you will ever uncover. It's a continuous journey. The way that you can get through is you need to notice the things along the way. He needs to see the pretty plant that he hasn't seen, the friendly farmer waving, the cow having a drink and the duck swimming in the pond. If he can see those little positive things and the scenery changing along the way, that is how he will find the courage to keep going on this journey.